Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September version of Night with the Experts from Nuclear Energy Information Service based in Chicago. My name is Dave Kraft. I'm director of NEIS, and tonight we're going to do things a little differently than we've done in the past. Night with the Experts is usually a short presentation by the presenter and then more time for you folks to dialogue and ask questions. But tonight we may turn things on our head a little bit because of an important issue that's coming up here in Illinois and nationally as well. So we'll be talking tonight about the abolition of the nuclear moratoriums. So I'm going to turn this over to my co-host and colleague, Jan Budart, for a minute, and he'll fill you in on what's going on. Jan?
Yes, this is Night with the Experts, and tonight expert is also the director of the Nuclear Energy Information Service. His name, of course, is David Kraft, and he's going to talk about a national problem where many states had nuclear moratoria until the federal government kept its promise to take care of the nuclear waste. And that was about 70 years ago, and the nuclear waste, that was about in about 82, but for 70 years, the nuclear waste has been sticking around, and nothing has developed to get rid of it or to store it, but still many states are rescinding their moratoria, even though the reason for it was the nuclear waste. So Dave's going to talk to us about the national problem that we're having with rescinding moratoria. And I will run the Q&A, and but I will talk to you about what the Q&A is like after David gives his talk. So David, I'm going to turn it back over to you. You're on mute, please.
Thank you very much, Jan. Okay, let me get the right PowerPoint ready, and then we'll get rolling here. So as Jan said, we are speaking about the nuclear construction moratoriums because the federal government has, as she said, not honored an obligation from 1997 to create a high-level radioactive waste facility for the disposing of waste. That, of course, is a terrible issue, especially for Illinois, which has 11 operating reactors. It had 14 at one point, and over 11,000 tons of high-level radioactive waste. So I'm going to be running through some slides with you as soon as I can find them here, and we will get down to some brass tacks. Now, although we'll be focusing quite a bit on Illinois, what I'm going to talk about tonight is very generic. We will be covering issues that are national in scope as well. So don't feel that you know, we're not going to be talking about things that don't apply to your state, because they do. As soon as I can find the slides here, I'm sorry about this. Okay, let me try again.
It's really nice to see all of you here, and some familiar faces, and then some people that I'm not so sure we're familiar with. So if you do, if you would put your name in the chat and your email, so that if we want to talk to you, we can send you email.
The chat is disabled.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, sorry about that. I guess we disabled the chat until the talk is over. But when the talk is over, put your coordinates in the chat.
Right. Okay. Sorry about that. Took a little longer than I thought. So this is the topic for tonight, and this has been an ongoing thing for us in Illinois for quite a while now. Let me just get rid of this, and then we'll get rolling. All right. Now, we are going to be also conducting this next week. We're going to have a special session, which will be tailor-made for legislators, their staffs, and the media, because this is such an important issue in Illinois, and our legislative session begins October 14th. At the same time, if there are those of you or if there are media who you feel you would like to be part of this, again, when we enable the chat after the presentation here, make sure you put the contact information for that person into the chat, and we'll make sure that those folks are invited as well. So, unfortunately, because of the world we live in these days, we have to go back to fundamentals, and that is the English language is in jeopardy. So I want to start out by really just getting down to the brass tacks of what is a moratorium. This has come up in Illinois a number of times, and I'll explain why in a little bit. But the important aspects of moratorium is that it's temporary. It is a delay or a waiting period of something that's been suspended, with conditions attached to it for getting rid of that suspension or waiting period. And this is a nuance that apparently gets lost on a lot of people who are very sloppy with language, because very often we hear directed back to us that we are trying to ban nuclear power. That's not what this moratorium in Illinois is about, and it's certainly not what the moratorium in many of the other states is about either. It is not a ban. It is a temporary halt under conditions which could be lifted at another future date when the conditions are met. So anyone who calls this a ban, you have the perfect right to say they are gaslighting. It is not, and if they are saying it, it's for some sort of purpose which is not legitimate. Now, nationwide, there are actually, in effect, at this point, 9 states that have a full-blown moratorium against any nuclear construction at all, whether it's small modulars, large reactors, doesn't matter. There are 4 states which have partial moratoria in place. Illinois is one of those. I'll get to that in a minute. And then over the last couple of years, we have found that there are 4 other states that have actually repealed their moratorium. And on this map, you can see they are the ones in green: Montana, Wisconsin, Kentucky, and West Virginia. The states in dark blue are the ones that have a continuing moratorium on all reactors. And the ones in whatever color comes up on your screen, yellow or orange, Illinois, New York, and Connecticut, we have conditional moratoriums in place. And this information comes from the Department of Energy. I will be putting links in the chat later where you can actually get a copy of that map and some very detailed information about the various stages of moratorium. But overall, the national moratoria on nuclear power have these 4, at least one, if not more, of these 4 conditions. No reactors can be built unless there is an operating federal nuclear high-level radioactive waste disposal facility somewhere. Some of the moratoria require state or local referendum for approval. Some have legislative approval. And then finally, some of these states require either the Public Utilities Commission or some other state agency like Environmental Protection to sign off on lifting the moratorium. So these are generally the conditions involved that have to be met before the moratoria can be removed. And these are the 2 sources that I say I will put in the chat, because there are some active links there that you'll be able to use later. Now I'm going to focus on Illinois as an example of what is going on. And again, if you're from another state, some of these conditions may differ, but a lot of this will apply to you as well.
Could you make these slides a little larger?
Probably not. I'm sorry to say, but I will try. Let's see what we can do here. Nope, I'm sorry. It just won't. Oh, there we go.
That's more better.
All right, that's as good as we can get. All right, so in Illinois, we currently have 12 reactors standing. Only 11 are operating, but we had 2 that were torn down already at the Zion site, 35 miles north of Chicago on the western shore of Lake Michigan. If we were a nuclear power, Illinois would be the 9th largest nuclear power in the world, just behind Japan. We also have over 11,000 tons of high-level radioactive waste sitting at the reactor sites. And after 9/11, we put on the map the normal-looking flight time that it would take from O'Hare Field, just outside of Chicago, to all of the various reactors within proximity of Chicago. And as you can't really see it very well on this map. We'll be happy to send you one, or you can go to our website and get it. The flight time is anywhere from 6 minutes to 27 minutes to any of the reactors that you see on this map, which has significance in a post 9/11 world. Oh dear. Well, now we're having some problems with the PowerPoint because of the enlargement, so I may have to go back here. There we go. Now, you don't have to read all this. This is the actual language in law from 1987. It is the statute that's still on the books. And I'll just highlight that the two important pieces here is that in Illinois, to lift the moratorium, two requirements are in play. The first is that the federal government has to have some sort of a operating facility that will deal with the disposal, not storage, disposal of high-level radioactive waste in the form of spent fuel. And I underscore that because that's another set of terms that gets thrown around very carelessly to make people think it's a lot safer than it is here in Illinois, because we are storing the waste safely, and that's good enough. Well, it may be good enough, except the federal government is out of compliance because they were supposed to have a high-level radioactive waste dump going by 1997, and they still haven't. The second condition is that, as you see here, the director of the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency has to make this determination, or a statute enacted by our General Assembly must take place, which would lift the moratorium. And again, we can send this to you if you request it later. Currently, as I mentioned earlier, Illinois is a partial moratorium at this point because 2 years ago, the legislature voted here to allow small modular nuclear reactors to be constructed at some point at Illinois. These would be reactors roughly 300 megawatts or smaller. Now, the nuclear advocates here in the legislature, and unfortunately Governor Pritzker as well, is saying that he wants to get rid of all the moratorium and allow for the construction of large-scale reactors, such as the ones you saw on the map of Illinois previously. These are anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 megawatts, given today's construction size. In the fall, we are anticipating a very large energy bill. It's an omnibus bill, SB 4116. It's an over 800-page bill, and on page 534, that language that I just went over on the previous slide has been crossed out, and that's what they want to repeal. So out of an 800-page bill, which has terrific aspects to it in terms of promoting renewables, improving transmission, getting more energy storage, they have tucked in a proposal to repeal the moratorium. So what they can't gain by fair, the advocates are going to try and gain by foul. And we believe in Illinois, it's our job to stop them and ask legislators to take that part out of SB 4116. And at the end of the presentation, we'll tell you how you can do that. So here are the reasons that we have gone over in the past why moratorium, both in Illinois but elsewhere, should be maintained. The first is that it worked. From 1997 to now, we have not taken in any new radioactive waste from any other state. And over the years, there was at one point a fear that Illinois could have become a central United States repository to store high-level radioactive waste. Fortunately, those plans didn't work out. But because we have a moratorium, no new reactors were built either. The corollary to that, though, is if you do build more reactors, you end up with more high-level radioactive waste, which essentially defeats the whole purpose of why the moratorium was enacted to begin with. In Illinois, and perhaps in the other states as well, we have ample evidence of poor nuclear economics, to the fact that we had to bail out our reactors here over the last 6 years to the tune of over $3 billion. So the economics in Illinois on nuclear and in this region are not particularly good. The third consideration are environmental justice implications, and I'll get to the details of this shortly. The fourth aspect is that market share is impacted by adding more reactors to an already glutted and poorly performing nuclear pool. And also there are some impacts on the ability for the reactors to get online in the transmission grid. The fifth objection, and many of you encountered this in other states, is that nuclear advocates claim that reactors are really essential for us to fight the climate crisis. The opposite is just the case, actually. Nuclear power has a negative impact on addressing the climate crisis. We find that in the world as it stands now, both in terms of climate, but also in terms of war, nuclear power is increasingly vulnerable, and that has implications for Illinois as well. Most recently, though, in May, the Trump administration put out executive orders which have serious effects to compromise reactor safety and reactor radiation exposure standards. Another argument you have probably heard in your state is that nuclear power is needed to power the upcoming data centers for AI. But unfortunately, both AI and nuclear reactors require considerable amounts of water, which will be perhaps in short supply in a climate-disrupted world. So finally, when you take all those as a gestalt, the fact that nobody wants to build these large reactors at the moment anyway, we come to the conclusion that there is absolutely no urgency to repeal our moratorium in Illinois, and most likely there is no urgency for it to be repealed in your state as well. So let's go to these objections one by one. Obviously, more reactors are going to mean more high-level radioactive waste. In Illinois, we already have over 11,000 tons. There's over 90,000 tons nationwide. And these 11 reactors that are operating currently in Illinois are going to be adding about 250 tons every year until they are shut down. As I mentioned earlier, fortunately, we have not imported any high-level waste from other states. But the problem is we still do not have a federal disposal facility. And the federal government has said numerous times that they don't anticipate having one in operation anytime before the year 2048, which means that every reactor site in the country is stuck with whatever quantities of high-level radioactive waste it's generated already and will continue to generate for as long as it's open. We calculated roughly in Illinois, since Constellation Energy wants to extend operating licenses out to 80 years, that this will result in as much as 10,000 more metric tons of radioactive waste stored in Illinois with no place to go because the federal government has still not kept its pledge to get a disposal facility in operation. I mentioned unfavorable economics, and this is language that Constellation and Exelon has itself used, that reactors are possibly going to be economically distressed. That's the language they use. And we saw that back in 2016 and in 2022 when large-scale energy legislation came before our legislature. As I mentioned, Constellation, Exelon received over $3 billion in pledged bailout money because of the poor economics of the reactors that were operating at the time. This was money that helped keep them going until the market turned their way and they were able to actually earn money operating the reactors. So in an open market such as we have, there's no guarantee that in the future, more reactors will not only glut the market, which would make the ones we have more uncompetitive, but also those reactors may in turn need bailouts of their own. And we did a back of the envelope calculation given the 80-year lifespan that Constellation wants to run the reactors out, that this could amount to as much as $11 billion in future bailouts, just for Illinois. I brought up the issue of environmental justice. If you have more reactors, you will need more uranium. And as it stands now, there are already 10,000 unremediated uranium mining sites in the United States, mostly on indigenous lands. And it would only get worse if we need to get more uranium for the new reactors that would be built. Secondly, since we don't have a disposal facility, there are those in the nuclear industry who have proposed creating what they call centralized storage facilities. And two proposals were made, one for southeast New Mexico, the other for southwest Texas. And here too, these storage facilities are being proposed on lands that are largely either indigenous or low populations of low income, which have already been abused radioactively or through chemical means in the past. So we are opposing the creation of these so-called interim storage dumps, partly because of environmental justice, but partly because of the economics involved, which are bad, and the fact that you would then have to transport high-level radioactive waste twice, which increases the opportunity for transportation accidents. And finally, we would point out that the previous administration, the Biden administration, had an advisory committee on environmental justice, which made it very clear that they did not consider nuclear power a benefit to any community, and therefore was a false solution for the climate problems. The market share issue I've gone over a little bit already. The reactors we had couldn't compete on the market we had for a variety of reasons. Adding more to the market will provide more power, which will glut the market and therefore make whatever reactors we have more uncompetitive. This is a serious problem and might require more bailouts in the future. And as a result, because of the market competition that would take place between more nuclear and the plans that Governor Pritzker in Illinois and other governors around the country may have to bring renewable energy online, there will be intense market competition, and it'll be the renewables that will probably get squeezed out in deference to more nuclear reactors that would be built. And you probably have encountered this in your own activities, that the nuclear advocates always describe nuclear as clean or emissions-free. These are problematic terms, particularly if they are enacted in legislation, and that has occurred in some of the states that we saw on the map earlier. Because once you legally define nuclear power as green energy or safe energy or clean, it is eligible for any of the funding mechanisms that legitimately should have gone towards renewables or energy efficiency or energy storage. So there is market competition for whatever slim pots of legislative funds that would be created in the future. Nuclear power therefore becomes a parasite on the funds that we established, hoping they would be devoted towards nuclear. Now, I brought up the issue of nuclear not being in any way, shape, or form capable of dealing effectively with the climate crisis. We actually have a whole presentation we can give on that, so I won't go into the details of it tonight. But suffice it to say that we can provide scores of articles from Forbes and other credible sources which make the case that nuclear power just is not an effective means to address climate change. My energy friend and colleague Amory Lovins has put it very succinctly when he says arithmetic is not an option. Nuclear power is simply the slowest, costliest, and least efficient means of getting carbon out of the atmosphere. So why on earth would anyone pick it when we have other options already available to us that don't melt down and don't cause the problems that nuclear does? So anyone who claims that nuclear is needed for climate change is either gaslighting, or we'll give you the option to have them send them to us and we'll talk to them happily. And it's not just us who has said this in the past. The former chairman of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has made it very clear that in his opinion, nuclear power is not going to be crucial to a crucial solution to climate change. Now, in a increasingly climate disrupted world, which is also accompanied at this point by wars, either in the process of happening or potentially happening, nuclear power is particularly vulnerable. And even though you may feel insulated in your own home states, that may not be quite the case for a lot of reasons. Because of climate disruption worldwide, we have already experienced instances where nuclear power plants had to either close completely or curtail operation because the water that they need was not available either to cool the reactor or to create steam. In a hotter world, reactors are less efficient at actually making electrons. It's just the laws of physics. There's nothing we can change about that. And there's an example of this. In 1988, Commonwealth Edison, which then owned our reactors in Illinois, from June 1st to September 1st, lost 100 reactor days of operation because there wasn't enough water in the Illinois River system to keep the reactors cool. What also happens is that the discharge waters from the reactors was too hot and was thermally polluting our rivers. So this not only occurred in the United States, it has occurred frequently in Europe since the turn of the century. Spain, Germany, Switzerland, France, of course, they have all experienced reactor shutdowns because of excessive temperatures and low water availability. As if that wasn't bad enough, though, on the oceans, jellyfish have been attacking nuclear reactors because the warmer oceans we have created from climate change are very, very amenable to jellyfish reproduction. And as a result, they have been swimming into the intake pipes of the reactors in France and shutting them down. So in a climate disrupted world, and by the way, there are jellyfish that are freshwater in nature, and this applies to the Great Lakes or anywhere else you have fresh water. You will see that more and more the climate disrupted world is going to have negative effects on nuclear power plants. On the coasts, we have sea level rise to worry about, but we also have inland things like derechos, which can knock down power lines and cause potential blackouts at reactor sites. Tornadoes, of course. These are all climate driven at this point and will have effects on nuclear plants. The more reactors we have, the greater the probability something will go wrong. As if climate change wasn't bad enough, though, we have plenty of wars that create an equal threat. And although they may seem to only be going on in places like Ukraine, Russia, or the Middle East, we've already had instances in Illinois where there have been potential reactor threats from alleged terrorists who were literally outside the gates of certain reactors and waving ISIS banners. So this is just one isolated example, but it can only get worse as the situations with wars get worse. Reactors will be much more vulnerable, as we have seen, to drones and shoulder-held missiles, which are readily available on the black market. We've already experienced in the United States numerous cyber attacks at various reactors around the country. So don't think that war is going to be somewhere else. The effects of war are already affecting US reactors. Add more reactors to that mix, you increase the probability of things going wrong. In May of this year, President Trump issued 4 executive orders, which by all standards have a number of effects, which I'll articulate in a minute. But the bottom line is they weaken the regulatory structure, which already is questionable in this country, and will attempt to weaken radiation exposure standards to the public and to workers at nuclear plants. These are the 4 executive orders. We actually did a Night with the Experts last month going in detail about this, and it is on our YouTube page if you'd like to see it, where we go into more detail on each of the executive orders. with our colleague Tim Judson of the Nuclear Information and Resource Service. But in summary, the NRC has been ordered to revise its mission statement. We already felt its present mission statement was bad enough because it only requires the NRC to provide an adequate level of public health and safety coming from nuclear power. It doesn't require gold-plated. It doesn't require the best of, just an adequate measure of safety. Now, I have to ask those of you who are here, how many of you, when you go on your vacation, are content to know that the ground crews adequately fueled your flight or adequately did maintenance on the flight? That's the present standard. The executive orders want to even weaken that by ordering the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to have other considerations that could compete with even that slim measure of safety. The purge of government agencies, it has not left the NRC unscathed. And there we are seeing that staff are being eliminated at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission at a time when President Trump is also ordering the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to prepare to quadruple the number of reactors we have operating in the country by 2050. We currently have 94 reactors operating nationwide. So you figure he wants another up to 400 reactors while he's reducing the staff to actually monitor them. New reactors are going to undergo fast-track licensing, and it would be bad enough if it was just the NRC that was conducting the fast-tracking, but DOGE has also been given a role in signing off on new reactor designs. In fact, there was a memo that had been spirited out of regulatory land where DOGE actually told the chairman of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and this is a quote, DOE and DOD would approve stuff, and then the NRC would be expected to just kind of rubber stamp it. That's the kind of regulation you are going to have in the future if this goes through. If you add more reactors to the mix, it's a recipe for catastrophe. As if that wasn't bad enough, the NRC has also been ordered to revisit the long-standing standard on radiation exposure called the linear no threshold model, which says that, as far as we can tell, examining literally hundreds, if not thousands, of radiation studies, there is no level of exposure to radiation below which we can say with certainty that solid cancers could not take place. That's been in effect for almost 20 years now. And just a few years back, the NRC revisited that concept and did a meta study of the studies that had been out there and came to the same conclusion that that is a valid statement. However, the Trump administration seems to think better, and they want the NRC to revisit that standard and perhaps get rid of it. They're also asking the NRC to consider revising or scrapping altogether something called ALARA, as low as reasonably achievable radiation standards, which are in effect right now. If they get rid of ALARA, as well as the linear no threshold model, there is virtually no standard of radiation protection left to the public or to the workers. Many of you have heard the need for new power is driven by data centers, but it's important to point out that in the world of the future, if you add more reactors to the already stressed environment, and you add AI and data centers to it, you will see a huge drain on water supplies at a time when water will become even more precious in a climate-disrupted world. We also have to question whether the estimates for power that they've been throwing around are actually valid. In January, China announced it had a version of AI which operated just as well as anything the United States had on 1/10 of the power. I'm not saying that that's true or not. I'm saying that we need to find out, because if that is the case, then this notion that AI is going to be requiring more nuclear plants may be way out of line and totally unnecessary. So from those two standpoints alone, the uncertainty of the amount of power needed and the fact that we know already that both nuclear and data centers guzzle tremendous amounts of water, we are in for a serious environmental problem. Not to mention the fact that AI and data centers only need electrons. They don't need nuclear generated electrons. They can get their electrons from other sources, which could be renewables. So I won't go into this. I put this slide in just to show you what you should never put in a PowerPoint, because you can't read this stuff. So lesson learned here, I hope. But we summarize, the feds have not met their pledged position of getting a disposal facility going. Nobody is announcing that they want to build new reactors in Illinois now or in the foreseeable future, although other states are different. Market forces are not favorable towards more nuclear reactors. And one thing we didn't touch on earlier, but we need to point out, is remind people that over the last 5 years in the states of Illinois, Ohio, and South Carolina, there have been huge bribery, political corruption scandals going on, where FBI indictments have been handed down and convictions have been made to the speakers of the House of Illinois and Ohio relating to nuclear power, and to a nuclear executive in South Carolina who admitted that bribery was at stake in a $9 billion nuclear plant construction. So this is an industry that is really ripe to be gamed, already has a history of political corruption, and you have to ask yourself if you really want to entrust your energy future to an industry like that. Now, I'm just going to go quickly over things that we have brought up, because you may be able to bring these up in your state. For a decade now, over a decade, we have been bringing up alternatives of what the current generation of nuclear power in Illinois needs, but have not gotten anywhere with our legislature or our various governors to get these things in place. Among these are, we need stronger laws for reactor decommissioning because of our horrible experience with the decommissioning of the Zion reactors. There's no just transitions for workers or communities if plants close. We've been advocating for that since 2014. Nobody has analyzed the potential for future nuclear bailouts. We've been advocating for hardened on-site storage of high-level radioactive waste. Nobody has taken that up in the legislature. And now the health implications protecting the Illinois population of these reactors, both the ones that we have now and the ones in the future, are at risk with the deteriorating regulatory structure at the federal level. Do we have enough electricity if we don't build more reactors? Absolutely. And this is not us saying this. These are people like energy analysts like Mark Jacobson of Stanford has come out with several books in the last few years where he does a deep dive on a state-by-state basis, showing how the states can meet their energy needs. A lot of this was already done by our good friend and colleague, Dr. Arjun Makhijani of the Institute for Energy and Environmental Research, first back in 2007 with his Carbon-Free, Nuclear-Free book, but also more recently, his analysis in Maryland of how they can meet their energy needs using renewables. These are all available as models that could be used for alternatives to nuclear. So our conclusion is very clear. We do not need new reactors. Nobody is clamoring to build them. There are tremendous problems and obstacles that have not been addressed, yet more reactors are being proposed. We have an industry that has already demonstrated how corruptible it is. And finally, it's just a situation where legislators are trying to fix something that isn't broken. So we are advocating in Illinois, and we hope you will in your state if it applies, that the nuclear moratoriums be retained until those conditions are met. So I will stop my long-windedness now, which is usually longer than our Night with the Experts guests do, but we felt we had to go into some detail, and now we want to give you the opportunity to weigh in with us and get into some dialogue. So let me get rid of the PowerPoint, and we will set up the process. So Jan, I'm going to turn it back over to you to give the explanation of the next part of the session, and then we'll take it away.
Okay, the next part is the Q&A, and I hope that you will be glad to participate in this event. Oh, Janice Wilton is clapping her hands. So if you do have questions, I will put you in the stack. You go to the bottom of your screen where it says React. Click there and you can raise your hand. Or if you raise your hand like this, I'll try to make sure that I see you. And Dave will help me pick out people who have raised their hands. Oh, I see Bob and Karen already have. And then if you want to, if you don't want to, yeah, there's Catherine and James. And anyway, if you want to put your question in the chat, we'll try to track that. But it's best if you read your own question. So we like to hear your voice and we like to see your face. We will allow everyone to ask a question and a follow-up because David might answer and then, you know, you need to clarify something. If you want to ask a second question, you can come back in the stack. Now, the session is scheduled for an hour and a half, and we usually do go over, but we will let everybody ask a second question if we have time. And so I think we ought to get started with questions and comments. Are there, okay, so I'll call on Bob Babcock. What is your question or your comment?
My comment is that I've heard no discussion about demand reduction as a response. And one reality is that all the money that they're talking about throwing into nuclear reactors, not to mention the bailouts and so on and so forth, can greatly contribute to demand reduction. A few years ago, when I worked in finance, I financed a ground source heat pump conversion and windows, doors, and siding on a building in on a home in Glen Ellen, and they were saving 73%. Just a few months ago here at our home, we had the windows and doors sealed, and we're saving 23%. Our buildings leak like sieves, our systems are antiquated, and we can greatly reduce the need for energy with that. And that should be a large focus. And yet everybody's going gaga over sustainable and solar, and all this energy is being diverted away from demand reduction, including towards eliminating the moratorium on nuclear reactors. And by the way, I don't like talking about tons in terms of waste. I mean, we're talking about 22 million pounds in Illinois. So I mean, just take that number, 11,000, multiplied by 2,000, et cetera, and you really get in touch with the reality of the problem. And David, I love the mention of disposal as opposed to storage. Have we figured out at all? Have we figured out at all how to dispose of this? Excuse me, shit. And that's all I've got to say.
Waste is waste. Yes, thank you for that. I would mention it wasn't an oversight that we didn't talk about demand reduction. It's actually one of the cornerstones of a whole other presentation that we do, where we have more or less an energy pyramid, which begins by doing nothing. Because if you don't figure out what you need the energy for, there's no rational reason for advocating for any of it, whether it's a windmill or a solar panel or a nuclear plant. So then our next step up is you have to reduce, and this often, it just does not get any kind of traction in most legislatures that I'm familiar with, and certainly not in Washington, D.C. A little side story, when I was doing community mental health work about 3 lifetimes ago, I actually used our diagnostic manual for psychiatric disorders, and to my horror, found that the clinical definition for addiction worked for electricity as well. That alarmed me. And that gets to your point of why we should be emphasizing demand reduction, is because we are energy addicts, and the only way you get off of addiction is by not using the stuff, or in this case, using it to the next step up on our pyramid more efficiently. So that, I just want to address that part. Is there a place, or do we have a method for disposal? We have concepts, and we have had concepts since 1995. But again, none of those have materialized into a disposal facility. And I'm glad you underscored the distinction as well between storage and disposal, because in our state of Illinois, Senator Sue Resin, who was sponsoring this moratorium repeal, has reassured legislators, oh, we store the waste safely at all the reactor sites. Well, maybe we do. Maybe we haven't had something going wrong so far, but the law doesn't require storage. The law requires disposal, permanent disposal of some means, as yet to be determined. But again, we are in breach of law. The other thing, though, to consider is when something is just stored, there's no guarantee it's going to get the same level of attention or be less vulnerable than if it were taken out of the environment perpetually. So we had a situation a number of years back where there was a terrific flood on the Missouri River Valley, to the point where it totally isolated a nuclear reactor. The reactor's name was Fort Calhoun. Because of the flooding of the river, we renamed it Port Calhoun. It was totally surrounded with water. They had to use sandbags to prevent the water from inundating the reactor. And it's a good thing that they had the storage facilities elevated on a small plateau on site, or it would have been underwater as well. So storage is qualitatively different. It is not what is required or necessary, and it shouldn't be used as a bullshit excuse for not doing your job on disposal.
Hey, David, is it fair enough to say that there are concepts of disposal?
Oh, yes, there are definitely multiple concepts. Yes. All right. Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, that was a good one. Catherine Barnes, would you please unmute and ask your question?
Yeah. It seems like years ago, in Michigan, we voted for Michigan to become a nuclear-free state. And for some reason, that was never enforced. I think the state stopped it or whatever. It wasn't enforced. It didn't, people voted for it, but it didn't go through. And what I'm wondering is, Michigan doesn't have a moratorium. How can we get one? How could we get one at this point?
Well, ask. That would be the thing. But it would be important also to how you word it, how you craft it. I know you're having a lot of rough times in Michigan right now with new reactors being proposed at Palisades, the small modulars, as well as the reopening of Palisades itself. If you have a strong enough coalition of groups involved, and this we need to go out beyond the nuclear people. We have to get the other enviros, but also people involved on tax issues. Public interest groups should be involved in this, saying, hey, wait a minute, before you subject us to the potential of more rate hikes or nuclear accidents, here's our laundry list of what we want. So once you can galvanize a movement to do that, then you can start putting in things like some of the conditions that we were advocating for. No more new reactors until this happens, that happens, that happens. We'd be happy to work with you on some of those conditions, and I'm sure people from other states have other great ideas too. Some of those, I put 2 links in the chat just a few minutes ago. The second one, 9 states currently ban all new nuclear power stations, has a blow-by-blow of the actual language of the various moratoriums from all of those states that were on that map. And they vary quite a bit from state to state, but that link will get you to the details of the kind of things those people in the states are asking for. Did that help?
Thanks, David. Yeah, thank you.
Right.
Okay, thank you, Catherine, for the question, and David for the answer. I don't know, Karen Russ. Could you introduce yourself and then ask your question?
Hi, I have 4 science degrees, and one of them I was studying climate science, and I belong to about 3 um, climate and environmental groups. I live in Rockford, Illinois.
Uh-huh.
So my question is, what is this magic number of date or year of 2048? Why are they saying nothing before then? And why are they implying that it could happen then for a high level reactive waste disposal facility?
Okay, it's an excellent question to be skeptical about even that date, and I'll give you a little history about it, where it came from, and whether it's legitimate or not, you'll have to decide. Um, as I mentioned, the 1982 High-Level Radioactive Waste Policy Act really got things in motion, that the nation had to come up with some sort of a disposal solution for the waste that was being generated, not storage, disposal. Chugging along, nothing happened. A lot of there were 6 regions of the state of the United States that were identified as potential candidates. 3 of those were taken off the map because of politics, quite literally. The senators and governors of their states objected so loudly that the politics killed them. And 2 of the next 3 felt that they had already been radioactively abused enough already, one of them being Nevada, Washington State. That left the state of Nevada, which is what Congress designated as that's where it's going to be. And not only that's where it's going to be, we prohibit you from looking anywhere else. So you need to understand those conditions. Fast forward, they were supposed to have a site in operation by 1997. Didn't happen, obviously. Fast forward a decade or so, President Obama's in the office. We created the Blue Ribbon Commission on America's Nuclear Future, which actually was a task force that dedicated, or was supposed to be dedicated, to the radioactive waste, quote unquote, solution. And it's in those deliberations where it came out that, given the fact that nothing had been going on, states were backing out, the best that they anticipated could be done based on the standards they set would be a facility no sooner than 2028. I've heard some people, or 2048 rather. I've heard some people say 2050, but I don't know if that's just, margin of error, who knows? So is it a legitimate number? I honestly don't know the answer to that, because it'll be, again, decided by politics. If the Trump administration can play King Canute and command the waves to recede and expect that to happen, then they'll jam the square fuel rod down the round hole of some state that doesn't want it, perhaps, and that'll be the solution. We hope that's not the way it's going to happen, but that is the history of how we got to where we are, and whether it's legitimate or not, I couldn't tell you. Now, that said, there has been a considerable amount of science, true science, geology, material science, things like that, put into exploration already. At one point, the nation was looking at an enormous salt formation down in the southeast. I believe it was either Texas or Oklahoma. And they thought salt would be terrific, because if you have a salt dome, that means nothing has washed it away. Water hasn't gotten in there. Therefore, it must be stable. Well, when they started, it was in Kansas, Lyons, Kansas, I'm sorry. When they started actually poking holes in to really examine the geology, they started finding brine pockets. So yes, the salt dome was largely intact, but it was unpredictable where these brine pockets would be. And if you're going to bore a hole down there and dump radioactive waste in, and eventually the brine pocket would intrude, it defeats the purpose. So salt got taken off the table. The Canadian Shield up in northern Wisconsin was also identified as a potential candidate, because that is some of the oldest rock formation examined on the planet, 3 billion-year-old granite. But there too, politics and some questionable geology prevented that from being selected at the time. So I'm not saying nothing has been done, but I'm saying what has been done has led to the conclusion that we haven't found the right spot. Now, getting back to Yucca Mountain, before she became NRC commissioner, Allison McFarland, Dr. Allison McFarland, is a trained geologist. That was her profession. And she was on that presidential Blue Ribbon Commission on America's Nuclear Future. So before becoming NRC chairwoman, she gave a presentation here in Illinois where she gave a pretty thorough analysis of the proposed Yucca Mountain site. And what she told the audience was that from the standpoint of geology, Yucca Mountain failed 2 of the 4 international standards for the safe disposal of high-level radioactive waste. It was in a highly reductive soil region of the country, and it was actively volcanic because there was evidence of volcanism in the last 100,000 years. I mean, so yes, science has been done, but we haven't found the lucky star yet. Now, they have opened a facility in Finland at Onkalo, and the Finns only have a handful of reactors operating. We have radioactive waste from, I believe it's up to 116 reactors that were operating here in the United States. So we would need multiple Onkalos to open up in order to handle our waste situation. We don't even know if that facility is going to work, but there's a terrific documentary online about that facility. It's called Into Eternity, which gives you a fairly decent examination of what the Finns went through to get that site in operation. So I'll leave it at that. And if you would like, I'll see if we can hunt up that link to Into Eternity and you can take a look at it. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think you're basically saying it was somebody's rough estimate for 2048 and not anything that good. And I know I studied the Yucca, we were taught about the Yucca Mountain proposal in a geology class, and they basically the professor said something about how on the time scale the material would be radioactive, you could get tectonic plate activity, and that could lead to cracks in the bedrock and contaminate the aquifer. I think that served Las Vegas, if I remember right, but it was just, there is no good place to, and I will say store nuclear waste, because that's what you're doing if you put them in a place like that. So,
well, some of us have kind of hedged a little bit and call it perpetual storage at this point, because I don't know what's realistic, quite frankly. I'm not a geologist, and I certainly have not delved in the technology, but a number of us on this Zoom session tonight did the deep dive on all of those technical documents when they were looking at Yucca, and yeah, it's grim. It's grim.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Karen, and it's good to meet you. Okay, we're going to call on James Gibbs. It's really nice to see you tonight, and would you mind asking your question?
Sure. Dave, you may have answered this, but if you did, I missed it. You said that the moratorium in Illinois was conditional or limited. What does that mean?
What we have in place now in law is not a complete prohibition on constructing all nuclear plants. 2 years ago, the legislature enacted a exception of small reactors under 300 megawatts could be built. So that's what I meant by partial or
Okay.
conditional. And that's, fast forward to now, they want to get rid of all the moratorium and allow for large reactors like the ones we had
Right.
up at Zion or the ones that are down at Braidwood, Dresden, Quad Cities to be built. The big 11 to 1500 megawatt size reactors.
So the small ones, for example, the one that they're working on at the University of Illinois could go ahead.
Yes. Now,
Okay.
we've done whole presentations on small modular reactors as well, and we'd be happy to do it for anyone who would request it again. On the small modular front, these are kind of arbitrary, but they're pretty much industry standard definitions. Overall, anything at or below 300 megawatts is considered a small modular reactor. Somewhat by definition, small modulars are considered advanced reactors, and there is a very specific definition of that in federal law. However, not all advanced reactors are small reactors, because some of them are huge. So that's one distinction that needs to be understood. The second, though, is within the small modular spectrum category, there is a spectrum. And anything in the megawatt range, 10 megawatts, 50 megawatts, maybe less than 100 megawatts, is actually not suitable for power generation. So those are really used for research, for training, experimental purposes. And that's what they're doing at University of Illinois. I forget the exact size. I think it's only 10 megawatts. It's not large, but
Okay.
they're using it as proof of concept, more or less, in that institution. This is also happening at other sites around the country, like Texas Christian in Abilene is one of them. I believe Penn State, Purdue, there are other academic institutions that are looking at these micro reactors for testing, for training, that sort of thing. There are over 70 proposed designs of small modular reactors in the United States alone, none of which have been licensed. There are over 120 worldwide. And again, none of them are operating and won't be commercialized until mid-2030s. So even the small modulars are sort of a joke. I mean, nobody has the capability of building them at the moment. We don't even know if many of these designs are going to work. And then the other part of it is that none of them are licensed. So, is this a tempest in a teapot? Maybe, but once you take something away legislatively, it's real hard to get it back. And that's why we're fighting on the moratorium issue. Once they get rid of the moratorium, the barn door is open for the future. We won't have these debates. We won't have any leverage to, guarantee just transitions or make sure that workers are taken care of or communities are planned for. That goes out the window once you get rid of the moratoriums. That's our only, and actually I should have made this point earlier. We've tried to make the point to the states that retaining the moratoriums is the one remaining piece of leverage states have legislatively in Congress to force them to make a disposal facility. Because if the feds really want nuclear so badly, the states have to say back to them, you can't have it until you keep your word and get us a disposal facility. Once you get rid of the moratorium, the message is conveyed to Congress and to the president, we're okay with it. Don't build a disposal facility. We'll make do with storage. So it's giving away political leverage unnecessarily.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, thanks, James or Jim. Okay, I'm going to call on Jake. Jake, if you can hear us, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay. Hi, thank you for your excellent talk. How do you bribe a jellyfish? That would make a good cartoon, jellyfish for nuclear power. I'm kidding. My question is, you were going to tell us what to tell the legislators in terms of the legislation. This moratorium, the way you described it, reminds me of the of Daley's parking meter deal. He hid it in this much larger ordinance, and he just snuck it through the city council. So that's what it sounds like that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to sneak it through a much larger bill. You hear what I'm saying?
Yes, this is a frequent tactic of all levels of politics. It's done at the city level, like you just mentioned. For those of you who are out of state, one of the most egregious abuses of power was a former mayor, Mayor Richard Daley, who just gave away the store by contracting with a private contractor to get $1.5 billion, and then they get to manage the parking meters for 75 years. Absolute wacko, but he did it and we're stuck with it. And this is something sort of similar where in this case, they're embedding something, the moratorium repeal, into something that's needed. They do this with the defense authorization at the congressional level too. There are all kinds of goofy things that get attached to those bills, and that's how they get them passed. So yes, that is true, and which is why we in Illinois are doing a couple of things. Although we targeted that bill number, SB 4116, we are not opposing the bill per se. But we have started a postcard campaign to the governor, which is more generic, saying, take out or do not pass any legislation which has a language that would call for more nuclear plants. Now, there are a couple other bills that will be in the hopper in the fall legislative session here in Illinois that more specifically deal with some of the nuclear plant aspects. I didn't go over those tonight. We can do that another time, or you can contact us. But I guarantee you those on the call here tonight will hear from us before October 14th when the session starts, urging you to send in postcards, make phone calls, and that sort of thing, saying, we want the renewable energy future we were promised with the Clean Energy Jobs Act and no more nuclear. Very simple message.
Okay,
Just
thanks.
just follow-up question. How many of the legislators know about the Price-Anderson Act?
I don't know.
I mean, I have a feeling that probably few of them do. Otherwise, they won't go rushing into it.
Yeah, quite possibly, or they'll think we're covered when we're really.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, Jake, if you know how to, take your hand down. I don't know how to get your, oh, thank you. Okay. We're going to call on Pat, and then I would like Mark Lundholm to present some of his things that he's put in the chat. Maybe they're not questions, but I think we'd just like to hear from you after we hear from Pat Bulla, if you don't mind, Mark.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, okay. So let's hear from Pat, and then we'll call on Mark.
I'm sorry that if this is a dumb question, but could you review for me what is the likely timeline for fusion nuclear? I keep having friends that say, well, blah, 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 we got to have. And I'm not very efficient at answering your question. I need help. Thank you.
Sure. Well, don't feel bad. I'm kind of in the same boat you are, quite honestly. I am not a physicist. I am not an engineer in that respect. But the old joke that I keep hearing from the physicists and engineers is, oh, fusion? Yeah, in 50 years. However, that said, just within the last month, there has been another quote unquote technological breakthrough, which is very exciting, about a new method of doing fusion power. And they're going to be throwing several $100 million of it down at Oak Ridge, Tennessee. They've already allocated some of the money to explore this new proposed method for fusion. To be clear, the distinction is important. I mean, we have not been able to do fusion because our technology is so primitive. You're essentially containing the power of the sun in a building. That's pretty tough. And it's very hot too. And we haven't been able to figure out how to do that quite yet. But these folks have a different technique, which they think might be a way around that roadblock that they've had in the past. So if you put your name and a thing in the chat there, I can maybe send the article that I saw about the fusion development. But quite frankly, nothing on the horizon, and you're not going to see anything commercially available for till 2048 at least, I'm sure.
Thanks, Pat. I thought the joke was that fusion energy is 10 years in the future, and it's been that way for about 60 years. Yeah, something like that. Anyway, Mark, how about you talking to us?
Yeah, thanks, Jan, and thanks, David. Your ability to communicate clarity on this is remarkable, and we had you on with our NWSOFA climate change group a couple of months back, and it was very well received. I hope you got good publicity out of that. We should have you on again. We will. Well, my comments about, we seem stuck in thinking that we can throw something away, and in the finite world, we can't throw anything away. So and disposal means you could maybe transmute it into something else. I don't know. I just think, and my other comment was, we have a great nuclear power plant in the sun. It's working quite well. We haven't begun to tap all the power that it produces without and there are no problems with doing solar. So those are my comments. And thanks, Jan. Thanks, David, for what you're doing.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll touch on a few of the things that you brought up. Let's start with the last one. We try to get across to the legislators the timing issue here. If this is a climate crisis, are we really acting like it's a crisis, or are we just having tea and crumpets on a Sunday afternoon in the park, hoping that the solutions will come forward? The very day I was testifying 2 years ago against small modulars, the moratorium for the small modulars, they broke ground on a facility southwest of Springfield called the Double Black Diamond. It was a proposed 800 megawatt solar facility. And back then I said, you legislators are throwing at me that you're worried about having enough power, you're worried about system reliability, that the electrons won't be there. These guys in your backyard just started a facility which in 2 years will be operating. I was wrong. They got it operating in, I think, 19 months. It wasn't 2 years. It just opened. And this past weekend, many of you participated perhaps in the National Sun Day event that Bill McKibben had called for. We were in the Chicago event, and they had a speaker from the stage talking about the Double Black Diamond. So you got 800 megawatts in a year and a half. We have no small modulars until the mid-2030s, and certainly no big reactors it takes at least 10 years in this country to get them built. In that time, I pointed out to the legislators, you could build 4 more of those solar facilities by the time you would even break ground on the first large reactor. It just doesn't get through to these guys. So the fix is in on other levels besides rationality. So definitely, as we said, the renewables, efficiency, even demand management and storage are all things that are implemented within months to years as opposed to decades. And they're far cheaper and they don't create radioactive waste. I don't know how much clearer we can get, but I did run across a very interesting quote in the last couple of days. There's actually 2 versions of it. The first was by Plato, who said that we can easily forgive a child who's afraid of the dark, but the real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light. And I think that kind of applies to legislators who just won't look at renewables as viable. But I think there's a much more concise version of it that I like better. Stupid is a condition, ignorance is a choice. And I have to think that legislators who aren't willing to look at the numbers, like Amory Lovin says, arithmetic is not an option, they are choosing to be ignorant and condemning their states, not just Illinois, but Oregon and the other states where they're fighting to keep their moratoriums in place. They are condemning their energy future to something that's not going to work. In the chat, Bob Babcock again put a notice, the difference between storage and disposal. And I think that somewhat ties into where you were a minute ago, Mark. Storage, by definition, is temporary. It is intended to be temporary. And the methods we have of dealing with radioactive waste storage are temporary. At every reactor site, there is what's called a spent fuel pool, kind of a misnomer, but that's what they call it. It is a glorified swimming pool, 40 feet deep, and it is necessary. It's a necessary operating function for the license of the reactor. You have to have one. And the hot fuel rods coming out, which are no longer useful for producing electrons, have to stay in this spent fuel pool anywhere from 5 to 10 years just to cool down, both thermally and radioactively. From there, they can be transferred to what are called dry casks, which are enormous 20-foot concrete cylinders, about 16 feet in diameter, where these fuel rods are then put and they're cooled down by air. Those are storage methods, okay? And that's what we're using right now. And here comes the interesting paradox. We point out that storage is temporary, but the Nuclear Regulatory Commission swears on a stack of phone books that the high-level radioactive waste can be kept on site safely for up to 100 years. If that's true, then what is the urgency of getting the radioactive waste off-site now and having these moratoriums repealed? There's a real inconsistency there, and we need to kind of point that out more. Disposal by law is defined as a permanent method of getting the waste dealt with in such a way that it is no longer a hazard to the environment and the creatures on it. And how that's to be done, well, there are different proposals. There have been boreholes, there have been mine shafts, deep geological repositories. There's a concept now called perpetual stewardship, which combines the methods somewhat. But I want to underscore that both storage and disposal are legally defined in federal law, and that we have to follow that and be very careful which words we use and how we use them. So hope that was clear.
Well, I wanted to share screen for a couple of reasons. One is that I have a picture of the dry casks, and I think this one is at Big Rock, but they're all more or less like this. I wonder if people have a concept of what these dry casks look like. And so do you mind if I show my picture?
Go ahead. You're a co-host.
Oh, sharing is not turned on. You can request sharing for this meeting.
Sorry, you're a co-host. You should, unless you signed out. Let me check here.
Oh, I had to sign out because my
That's why. Hold on. No need to say anything else. There you go. Should be good to
Okay.
go now.
Okay, I thought this picture is pretty good. It shows there are 65 of these at Zion, but I do believe this one is in Big Rock. Can you see it?
Yes.
So it was just an idea to show people how big these casks really are. And they're concrete, but inside is a canister that contains the spent fuel rods. And the spent fuel rods, of course, are extremely radioactive. And but I just thought this is my best picture that shows the size of the spent fuel casks. And then I was wondering if I don't know how to get rid of all this stuff that's on my screen now. Oh, anyway, what?
How tall is it?
Anybody know how tall it is? You can see how wide around it is by comparing it to that young woman that's standing there.
It seems to me, I remember someone saying 15 feet high.
Looks a lot taller than that.
Well, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to answer that question.
As you can see, they're quite large. We're only off by a few feet, and I think you get the idea of the concept. What's interesting, though, is if and when the federal government ever does get this disposal facility, all the crud in all of these big canisters are going to have to be taken out and then transported somehow.
Yes.
And that is really heavy load to put on a truck or a train and transport across our rails and roads and bridges. So keep that in mind, that when the day comes, we better have a much better infrastructure in place, because we don't have the Starship Enterprise.
Okay. Then I did have one other thing I wanted to share, but I'm not sure that I have the skill to bring it up. Let's see. Well,
Doug Ower points out that the Zion casks are 18 feet, 9 inches high.
oh, okay, good.
So it gives you an
Um,
idea. You got a pretty hefty can there.
Mhm. Okay. So does anybody else have a question that you'd like to bring up or?
Well, can we stop the share screen? There we go.
Yeah, there we go. Stop the share.
So are we gonna get
Oh.
copies of these slides and the links, for instance, like for Tuesday, David?
I can make available the slideshow to whoever puts your email in the chat. On Tuesday, as I said, we're focusing with legislators and media primarily, so it's going to be a different kind of detail. Both of the sessions will be taped. This one is being taped tonight, and it should be up on YouTube in the next day or two. The one on Tuesday, we're only going to be taping the presentation because I think the legislators would object if we taped their responses or questions or whatever. I could be wrong, but I'll ask them. And at least that much will be taped and made available.
Sooner I get that link, the better, because
Mhm.
you know, it takes time to get that, and their staffers,
Yes, yes.
you know.
Give me a moment here. I'm going to put the NEIS YouTube page link in the chat so you guys can take a look at some of the things that I've been talking about already. Last month, as I mentioned, we had Tim Judson from NEIS talking about the executive orders. And that was a very, very interesting presentation. But there are many, many other presentations, like from Mark Jacobson on renewables. We have several presentations on the small modular reactors. I just put the YouTube page in the chat there so you can access those anytime you want.
Oh.
Looks like Jake has a question, it looks like again.
You want to give your question, Jake?
Thank you. Can you repeat again the bill number?
Yes. SB 4116.
SB 4116, and what's the name of it?
I don't know that it has a formal name yet,
Okay.
but it's huge. It's 800 pages.
Oh,
They'll call it the big
okay.
energy bill or something like that.
Big energy bill. Okay. And what do you want to tell them? That we're support the bill, but we want them to take out the language.
Take out the moratorium language. Yes.
Take out the moratorium. So in other words, keep the moratorium.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I should
All
point
right.
out,
And
from what I've seen so far of this bill, there is some really important, valuable stuff that we have to fight for. They're talking about improved energy storage, improving our transmission grid, which is absolutely essential.
Yep.
So no matter what kind of energy you're generating. So there's a lot of stuff we have to fight to keep in this bill, because there'll be folks out there who want to take that stuff out too.
Right. Okay. What's the timing? Do you know will it come up during the veto session?
The Illinois veto session, it comes in 2 weeks. It's the 14th through the 16th of October. They take a break, and then it'll be the 28th through the 30th of October.
Okay, but do we know for sure that this will be coming up?
I've seen press accounts that say that the legislators are really working to make it happen. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to call on Linda. Jim, if you'll forgive me, Linda hasn't spoken yet, so let's hear what she's got on her mind.
Good to
Can
see
you hear me, Dave?
Oh yeah, we can hear you.
Hi. Do you just want to, and also to remind everybody, or maybe you did before I came on a little late too, if we want to see any change at all, we need to bring these legislators to this briefing. So whoever is on this call that needs to talk to their legislator plus to come to this briefing, this is our responsibility right now to do that. So I just wanted to mention that. That's the action now, and nothing's going to happen without them, first of all, listening, let alone engaging with us to stop this madness.
Right, you're right, Linda.
Yeah.
I'm putting it in the chat now that, have them, or you guys can do it yourselves, contact us, and we'll make sure you get the registration link for that, and they'll be able to attend.
And you're
Thanks.
welcome to say when you talk to your legislator that Robin Gable is working very hard to oppose this repeal of the moratorium, if that will carry any weight.
And Representative Gable is the #2 person in the House, the Illinois House. So she carries a lot of weight. She's well respected, and has been a very generous person with her time and her efforts to support safe energy. Thanks, Linda.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. Okay, Jim. Shoot.
Very quickly, when you talked about the casks and then the removal of radioactive material from the sites, I think you said that all of that will have to be taken out of the cask to be transported elsewhere. To me, that was alarming. Is it the case that the casks are so large and heavy that you couldn't take the whole cask and put it on a railroad car or something? Because it seems to me to take all that radioactive stuff out and handle it is
A good point. I'm glad it alarmed you, because it was supposed to. Here's the deal, though, on radioactive waste. We could do whole presentations on this.
We're short on time. So
no, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. So what happens is they are in the process of developing, a number of things. There have been proposals for what they call multi-purpose casks, which could be used either for stationary storage and or transport. Probably be a slimmed down version, so it wouldn't weigh quite as much as the ones you saw there. But the kicker is they have to do this remotely in some manner. There has to be a mechanism in place where the lid is taken off of those cylinders that you saw there. There's a welded lid on top that has to be broken into. Those hot rods, and they are both thermally and radioactively still hot, even though they've been in a swimming pool for 10 years and however long in the dry cask, they will have to be lifted out and then put into these transport casks, which are still in development. I just saw a notice the other day that the Holtec company has come up with a new design for one of those, and I'm not sure if it's been licensed or not yet, but the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is the one that would have to sign off, as well as some other federal agencies, to make sure that those casks are transportable and are safe. But you bring up the good point of, regardless, whichever cask is used, it is a heavy load. And there have already been instances where flatbed truck haulers have turned over with these kind of loads, and they had to put them back on. Not nuclear related, but I'm sure we're all well aware of instances of train accidents. Most notorious, perhaps, is the Baltimore tunnel fire of a number of years back, which blazed for 3 days underground. Fortunately, there were no radioactive waste transports going on through the tunnel. And of course, we're all familiar with East Palestine, Ohio. This is our infrastructure. And putting heavy loads like this on the infrastructure, even if they themselves are able to be transported, that kind of load puts a lot of stress to the point where whoever comes after them could end up with a rail accident or a bridge accident or something like that. These are engineering things that have to be really thoroughly examined all across the country before we can move this stuff. And again, it's predicated on the notion of having a permanent disposal something, if you want to call it a facility or method, whatever. And we would object to it if it were just to move it to another storage site where it would then have to be moved a second time. Unless there's an absolute god-awful you got to move it or die kind of situation, which could come up where you really have to move it or else something worse would happen.
Okay, thanks.
I wonder if this is a time to talk about the indigenous people of the United States are very conscious of this problem. And there is a declaration that came from 2017 that was that was declared by the Anishinaabe Iroquois Coalition, and it's called the 2017 Declaration. And it is a plan that the indigenous people who have lived here for thousands of years realize that you're never going to be able to abandon nuclear waste. You may not abandon it. It has to be paid attention to in perpetuity. And they developed a plan, and they set it out in a declaration. And I could screen share that if you're interested, but it's like one of those things that Dave said you should never put up in a Zoom link because you can't really read it. But it's a very interesting document, and Gordon Edwards has picked it up, and he has become the main person to espouse this plan, which is called rolling stewardship, which means you're not going to transport this stuff. You're going to watch it
Well, Jan,
in perpetuity.
in the interest of time and actually and focus as well, I would rather not put that
Yeah.
up. But if people want it, put the request in the chat and we could then email it to people.
I'd be glad to send it to you.
I'd like to stay focused on moratorium if
Yeah.
about
And
that.
I think Linda's up again. Did you? Oh, no, she said she's leaving for a minute. Okay.
Oh, there we go. She's back.
Oh, Linda, go ahead, will you?
I think, Jan, that you covered it in what you just said. I just wanted to mention again, you might have said this before, that there's this film that's being promoted, shown right now, San Onofre Syndrome. I don't remember the name of the movie.
That's it. SOS, San Onofre Syndrome.
It goes into the waste issue deeply and thoroughly, and so I commend it to you.
All right. Are there any other questions or comments about the moratoriums, either in your state or what you've heard from Illinois?
There being none,
All right.
I think we should close the meeting.
Well, not quite. So I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Our next Night with the Experts will take place in October. Let me get you the date, folks. The last Thursday of each month, as always. And that happens to be the 30th, which is also the last day of the Illinois legislative session. We haven't quite determined the topic, but we will shortly, and we'll get.
Yes, I think that Thomas A. Bass is going to speak about his book, Return to Fukushima.
Okay.
And Thomas A. Bass will be our presenter.
All right. So there you have it.
Mm-hmm.
We will have a presenter for next month. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us as always. This has been taped. It will be up on YouTube in the next few days. And those of you who stuck it out the whole night here with us, you'll be getting a copy of the chat where a number of links and references are put in. And we'll take a look at some of the requests that you've put in there and make sure you get the pieces that you wanted. So thank you for joining us tonight, and we wish you well, and no nukes.
Thanks for coming, all.